The Chicago skyline glittered against the twilight sky as Isabella Monroe stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the architectural firm where she worked. Her phone buzzed with a text from James, and despite the exhaustion from a long day of client presentations, she smiled. After 18 months together, he still made her heart race with something as simple as a good morning text or a surprise coffee delivery. She grabbed her coat and headed out, excitement building as she thought about the evening ahead. Tonight was the annual Metropolitan Charity Gala, and James had invited her to attend as his date. It would be the first time she would meet many of his family's friends and associates in such a formal setting. Isabella had worked hard to get where she was. The daughter of a high school teacher and a bookstore owner, she had put herself through architecture school, with scholarships and part-time jobs. Now, at 28, she was one of the rising stars at Morrison & Associates. Known for her innovative designs that blended sustainability with aesthetic beauty, James Carter had entered her life at a hospital fundraiser where she was presenting a proposal for a new children's wing. He was a cardiac surgeon, brilliant and compassionate, with warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Their connection had been instant, and what started as coffee dates turned into weekend getaways and talks about the future. The gala was being held at the Grand Ballroom of the Drake Hotel, a magnificent space dripping with crystal chandeliers and gold accents. Isabella wore a navy blue gown she had saved for months to buy, simple but elegant. When James saw her, the way his face lit up made every penny worth it. For the first hour, everything was perfect. James introduced her to colleagues and friends, his hand never leaving the small of her back. They danced, laughed, and Isabella felt like she belonged in this world that was so different from the one she grew up in. Then Victoria Hayes arrived. James's mother was a force of nature, a woman who commanded attention the moment she entered a room. Draped in diamonds and designer labels, she swept through the crowd with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Isabella had met her twice before, brief encounters that left her feeling scrutinized and found wanting, though Victoria had been coldly polite. Tonight was different. Victoria approached them near the bar, her expression serene, but her eyes calculating. Isabella felt James tense beside her, and a knot formed in her stomach. "James, darling," Victoria said, her voice carrying just enough to attract nearby attention. "I need to speak with you and your companion." "Mother not here," James said quietly. But Victoria was already moving toward a quieter corner, expecting them to follow. They did, and Isabella immediately regretted it. "I've been patient," Victoria began, her tone still pleasant, but with an edge sharp enough to cut. "I've watched my son waste 18 months on this little romance, hoping he would come to his senses. But I see now that I need to be more direct." "Mother, please," James started, but Victoria held up a perfectly manicured hand. "Isabella, is it? Let me be clear. I know exactly what you are. A girl from nowhere with a decent job, yes, but nothing that qualifies you to be part of this family. You saw an opportunity when you met my son, a chance to elevate yourself." Isabella felt her face flush hot. "Mrs. Hayes, that's not true. I love James. I never cared about his money or his family's name." "Of course you'd say that," Victoria replied smoothly. "They always do. But I've seen dozens of girls like you try to trap successful men. You're pretty, I'll give you that, and clever enough to know that playing hard to get makes you more appealing." "That's enough," Isabella said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm not going to stand here and be insulted. James and I are together because we care about each other." Victoria's laugh was cold. "James comes from a lineage of physicians and philanthropists. The Hayes family has been a pillar of Chicago society for 4 generations. And you think you can just walk into that? A girl whose father teaches high school and whose mother sells used books?" Each word was designed to wound, and they did. But what hurt more was the silence. Isabella turned to James, waiting for him to say something, to defend her, to tell his mother she was wrong. James stood frozen, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound. The man who performed life-saving surgeries with steady hands, who spoke with confidence in operating rooms, couldn't find words now. "James," Isabella whispered, giving him one more chance. "Say something." He looked at her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes, the war between what he wanted and what he feared. But he remained silent, and in that silence, Isabella's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. "I see," she said softly. She turned to Victoria, forcing herself to meet those cold eyes with dignity. "You're right about one thing, Mrs. Hayes. I don't belong here. Not because I'm not good enough, but because I deserve better than a man who won't stand up for me." She walked away, her head high despite the tears threatening to spill. Behind her, she heard James finally call her name, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. If she stopped, she might crumble, and she refused to give Victoria Hayes that satisfaction. Isabella didn't go home immediately. She sat in her car in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the humiliation and heartbreak. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with calls and texts from James, but she couldn't look at them. After an hour, she drove to the 24-hour clinic near her apartment. The pregnancy test she had taken that morning had been positive, and she needed to confirm it with a doctor. Throughout the evening, even during Victoria's attack, a small part of her had been focused on the tiny life growing inside her. Dr. Susan Park confirmed what Isabella already knew. She was 8 weeks pregnant. "Do you have support?" Dr. Park asked gently, noticing Isabella's tears. "The father? Family?" Isabella thought about James, about his silence, about how he had let his mother tear her apart. She thought about telling him about the baby and imagined Victoria's accusations intensifying. She would say Isabella had trapped him, that she had gotten pregnant on purpose. "I have my sister Isabella," finally answered. "That's enough." Over the next 2 weeks, Isabella made her plans with the same determination she had used to build her career. She spoke to her firm about working remotely, citing a need to care for a sick relative. She found a small house to rent in Seabrook, coastal town 6 hours north where her sister Ruby had recently moved to teach at the elementary school. She changed her number, deactivated her social media, and left no forwarding address. Let James wonder where she went. Let him feel a fraction of the abandonment she felt. Ruby helped her move, asking few questions but providing endless support. In Seabrook, Isabella threw herself into her work and preparing for motherhood. She took long walks on the beach, feeling the baby grow stronger inside her. She talked to him because somehow she knew it was a boy, telling him about the life they would build together. She named him Thomas, after her father. The months passed in a blur of doctor's appointments, nursery preparations, and remote work calls. Isabella found peace in the small town, in the rhythm of the waves, the kindness of neighbors who didn't know or care about Chicago society. But her pregnancy was not easy. By the 7th month, her blood pressure began climbing. Dr. Patricia Wells, a local physician, monitored her closely, growing increasingly concerned. "I don't like these numbers," Dr. Wells said during a checkup in Isabella's 8th month. "If anything changes, any pain, any unusual symptoms, you call me immediately." Isabella promised she would, but she wasn't worried. She had survived heartbreak and humiliation. She could handle a complicated pregnancy. She had no idea that in 1 month, during the worst storm Seabrook had seen in 20 years, fate would bring her face to face with the man who had broken her heart, and that both their lives would hang in the balance. The storm hit Seabrook on a Tuesday evening with a ferocity that shocked even the longtime residents. Rain hammered against windows, winds tore shingles from roofs, and the ocean churned gray and furious against the shore. Isabella stood at her kitchen window, one hand on her swollen belly. Watching tree branches whip violently in the wind, Thomas kicked hard inside her, as if sensing her anxiety. She had felt off all day, a dull ache in her lower back that wouldn't go away, a tightness in her chest that made breathing difficult. She had called Dr. Wells twice, but the doctor was at the hospital dealing with storm-related emergencies. Ruby had gone to the school to help secure supplies before the worst of the storm hit, promising to return within an hour. That had been 3 hours ago, and Isabella's calls were going straight to voicemail. The cell towers must be down. The pain came suddenly, sharp and devastating. Isabella doubled over, gasping as something warm and wet flooded down her legs. Her water had broken, but this wasn't right. There was too much blood, dark and frightening. "No, no, no," she whispered, reaching for her phone with shaking hands. She dialed 911. "Emergency services are delayed due to the storm," the operator said, her voice crackling through static. We'll send an ambulance as soon as possible. Are you in immediate danger? I'm pregnant, 8 months, and I'm bleeding. Isabella managed through clenched teeth. Another wave of pain hit her, stealing her breath. Help is coming, the operator promised. Stay on the line with me. But the line went dead as the power failed. Plunging the house into darkness, broken only by flashes of lightning, Isabella made it to the front door, knowing she needed to get to the main road where the ambulance could find her. Each step was agony, each breath a struggle. She collapsed on the porch as headlights cut through the rain. The ambulance had arrived faster than she dared hope. The ride to Seabrook Community Hospital was a blur of pain and fear. The paramedics worked efficiently, their voices calm but urgent. Isabella heard terms like blood pressure, critical, and fetal distress. That made her heart hammer even harder. At the hospital, Dr. Wells met them at the door, her face grave. Get her to OR 2 immediately. Page every available surgeon. Dr. Wells. Isabella gasped, grabbing the doctor's hand. Save my baby. Whatever happens, save Thomas. I'm going to save you both, Dr. Wells promised. But Isabella could see the worry in her eyes. In the operating room, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Isabella's blood pressure spiked dangerously high, then dropped too low. The monitor screamed warnings that the baby's heart rate was falling. We need a specialist, Dr. Wells said to her team, her usual confidence shaken. This is beyond my expertise. The placenta has abrupted completely, and she's hemorrhaging. If I make one wrong move, I'll lose them both. The head nurse grabbed the phone. The medical conference at Harborview is only 30 minutes away. Isn't that where the cardiac and emergency surgeons are meeting? Call them. Get me the best surgeon there. I don't care what it takes. 25 minutes later, Dr. Wells heard footsteps running down the hallway. The door burst open, and a tall man in scrubs rushed in, already pulling on sterile gloves. I'm Dr. James Carter from Chicago Memorial, he said, his voice authoritative and steady. I specialize in higher-risk emergency procedures. Brief me quickly. Dr. Wells rattled off Isabella's vitals and situation as James moved to the operating table, his eyes scanning the monitors. His hands were already positioning for the first incision when he glanced down at the patient's face. The world stopped. Every sound faded into white noise. His hands froze in midair. The surgical mask suddenly felt suffocating, his heart pounding so hard he thought his chest might explode. Isabella, he breathed, the word barely audible. Dr. Carter? Dr. Wells's voice cut through his shock. Do you know this patient? James couldn't speak, couldn't move. Isabella was here, right here, unconscious on an operating table, 8 months pregnant. The math clicked instantly in his mind. 8 months since the gala. 8 months since she disappeared. This was his child. His son or daughter fighting for life while Isabella was dying right in front of him. Dr. Carter? Dr. Wells's voice was sharp now. If you can't do this, I need to know now. The monitors shrieked as the baby's heart rate plummeted dangerously low. That sound, that urgent alarm, snapped James back into focus. His training, years of saving lives in impossible situations, took over. I can do this, he said, his voice suddenly rock steady. Scalpel. The surgery that followed was the most difficult of James's career, not because of the technical challenges, though they were immense, but because every cut, every suture, every decision was weighted with more than professional responsibility. This was Isabella, the woman he loved and lost. This was his child whose life hung by a thread. His hands moved with precision born from thousands of hours in operating rooms. He worked through the complications, each one more dangerous than the last. The placental abruption had caused massive internal bleeding. Isabella's blood pressure was unstable, swinging wildly between extremes. The baby was in severe distress. Prepare for emergency delivery, James ordered. His voice remained calm, but inside he was screaming. Dr. Wells assisted, pressed despite the circumstances by his skill and composure. She had no idea she was watching a man perform. Surgery on the woman he loved and the child he never knew existed. The moment James lifted the baby free. A boy with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists already clenched, time seemed to suspend. The infant wasn't breathing. James handed him quickly to the waiting pediatric team while he worked to control Isabella's bleeding. "Come on," the pediatrician murmured, working on the baby. "Come on, little one." 15 seconds of terrible silence. Then a cry, weak at first, but growing stronger. The baby was breathing. "He's stable," the pediatrician announced. "It's a boy, and he's a fighter." James felt tears burn behind his eyes, but he couldn't stop now. Isabella was still in danger. He worked with focused intensity, repairing damage, stopping bleeding, fighting for her life with everything he had. 2 hours later, he tied off the final suture. Isabella's vital signs had stabilized. She was going to live. "Exceptional work, Dr. Carter," Dr. Wells said quietly. "I've never seen anyone handle a case that complex." James pulled off his gloves, his hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. He walked to where his son lay in an incubator, finally allowing himself to really look. The baby had Isabella's nose, her delicate features. But James could see himself there too, in the shape of the years. The line of the jaw. "Thomas," he whispered, reading the name card that someone had already placed on the incubator. Isabella had named him Thomas. "I'm your dad, and I'm so sorry I wasn't there before, but I'm here now. I promise I'm here now." He stayed there, one hand pressed against the incubator glass, until Dr. Wells came to find him. "She's waking up," she said. "I think you should be there." James's legs felt weak as he walked to Isabella's recovery room. How did he begin to explain? What could he possibly say that would make any of this right? He pushed open the door, and Isabella's eyes met his. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Isabella's hand moved to her now flat stomach, panic flaring in her eyes. "Ah, Thomas," she said, her voice hoarse. "Where's my baby?" "He's safe," James said quickly. "He's in the NICU, but he's breathing on his own." "He's perfect, Isabella. He's absolutely perfect." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I want to see him. I'll have them bring him," James said. But when he moved toward the door, Isabella's voice stopped him. "Why are you here?" He turned back, meeting her eyes. "I was at a medical conference nearby. They called me for the emergency. I didn't know it was you until I was already in the OR. So fate brought you here," she said bitterly. "After 8 months, fate decides we should meet like this. Isabella, I looked for you. For months, I searched everywhere. Not hard enough." Her voice was weak but sharp with pain. "You let your mother destroy me, and you said nothing. Not one word in my defense." "I know," James said, moving closer to her bed. "And I've lived with that shame every single day since. There's no excuse for what I did. I was a coward, and you paid the price." A nurse brought Thomas in, carefully placing the baby in Isabella's arms. The anger on her face softened instantly as she looked at her son, counting his fingers, touching his soft cheek. "Hello, my love," she whispered. "Mom is here." James watched them, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. This was his family right here, and he had missed 8 months of it because he hadn't been brave enough to fight for what mattered. "I'll go," he said quietly. "I'll give you space. But Isabella, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I've changed." He left before she could respond, but as he walked down the hospital corridor, he made a silent promise. He wasn't going to lose them again. This time he would fight. 3 days after the surgery, Isabella was moved from intensive care to a regular room. Thomas remained in the NICU for monitoring, though he was improving rapidly. The storm had passed, leaving Seabrook battered but recovering. Much like Isabella herself, Ruby finally made it to the hospital. Having been stranded at the school during the worst of the flooding, she burst into Isabella's room with tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed, hugging her sister carefully. "I tried to get to you, but the roads were completely flooded. I was going out of my mind with worry." "It's okay," Isabella assured her. "We're both fine now." "Because of him," Ruby said, her voice carrying a strange mixture of gratitude and anger. "The nurses told me everything. James saved your life and Thomas's life. He performed a miracle in that operating room." Isabella looked away. She knew she owed James her life and their son's life. That debt felt impossibly heavy on top of all the complicated emotions she still carried. James came by every day, sometimes multiple times, always asking permission before entering her room. He would check her vital signs with professional detachment, then spend hours sitting beside Thomas's incubator. Talking softly to his son, Isabella watched him through the NICU window one afternoon. Seeing the tenderness in the way he touched Thomas's tiny hand, the tears on his face when Thomas grasped his finger. This was a side of James she had always known existed but had never seen so openly displayed. On the fourth day, Victoria Hayes arrived. Isabella was nursing Thomas when the door opened, and James's mother swept in. Looking as impeccable as always despite the 6-hour drive from Chicago, Isabella's whole body tensed, instinctively pulling Thomas closer. "Mrs. Hayes," she said coolly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see my grandson," Victoria said, her eyes fixed on the baby. "James called and told me about him. You're not welcome here. Isabella, please." James appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. "Just hear her out." "Why should I?" Isabella demanded, feeling anger surge through her. "So she can insult me again? Tell me I'm not good enough for her precious family?" Victoria's expression flickered with something that might have been shame. She sat down in the chair across from Isabella's bed, her usual commanding presence somehow diminished. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said, the words clearly difficult for her. "What I said to you at the gala was cruel and unforgivable." "I was wrong about you." Isabella stared at her, shocked. Victoria Hayes did not apologize. Ever. "I've spent the last 8 months watching my son fall apart," Victoria continued. "He searched for you everywhere. He hired private investigators. He drove to every small town within 500 miles. He was losing weight, barely sleeping, destroying himself with guilt and grief." "That's not my fault," Isabella said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Oh, it's mine," Victoria said quietly. "I raised James to value reputation and status above everything else. I taught him that protecting the family name was paramount. And when the moment came for him to choose between those old lessons and the woman he loved, he froze." She looked at Thomas, her eyes softening. "But he chose right in that operating room. Dr. Wells told me what happened. She said she's never seen a surgeon push themselves like that, never seen someone fight so hard to save a patient. James didn't just save you because you're the mother of his child. He saved you because he loves you." Isabella felt tears burning in her eyes. She looked at James, who stood in the doorway looking vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Victoria continued. "I have no right to ask that. But I am asking you to consider giving James another chance. He's not the same man who stood silent 8 months ago. That surgery changed him. Becoming a father changed him. Losing you changed him." Isabella looked down at Thomas, who had fallen asleep in her arms. She thought about the 8 months she had spent alone, building a life for her son, convincing herself she didn't need James, but the truth was more complicated. She had never stopped loving him, even when she hated him, even when she tried to forget him. "Can I have a moment alone with James?" she asked quietly. Victoria nodded and left, closing the door behind her. James moved closer, but didn't sit, giving Isabella space to decide what came next. "Why didn't you defend me that night?" Isabella asked the question she had carried for 8 months, finally voiced. James sat down slowly, as if his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "Because I was terrified. My whole life, I've been the perfect son. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect reputation. And my mother was right about one thing. I did care too much about what people thought." He looked at her, his eyes red and raw. "When she attacked you, I wanted to defend you. The words were in my head, ready to come out. But I got stuck thinking about the consequences. What if I chose you and my family cut me off? What if society turned against us? What if I lost everything? So you chose to lose me instead." "I chose nothing," James said bitterly. "I froze like a coward, and by the time I found my voice, you were gone. And Isabella, I would give anything, absolutely anything, to go back and choose differently." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of his words. "I was going to tell you about the baby that night. I had the test results in my purse, but after what happened, I couldn't. I was so hurt and angry, and I thought you'd never believe the baby was yours. I thought your mother would say, I trapped you on purpose. I would have believed you, James said fiercely. I would have believed anything you told me, because I trusted you completely. I still do. Trust isn't enough, Isabella said softly. I need to know that if your mother or anyone else tries to tear me down again, you'll stand up for me. I need to know you're strong enough to choose us over what's easy or comfortable. James stood and walked to where she sat, dropping to his knees beside the bed, so they were eye level. I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you that I've changed. I'll shout it from rooftops if I have to. You are the woman I love. Thomas is my son. And anyone who doesn't respect you doesn't get to be part of our lives, including my mother, if that's what you need. You'd really cut off your mother for me. I'd cut off anyone who hurt you, James said with absolute certainty. I already told her that if she ever speaks to you with anything less than complete respect, she won't see me or Thomas again. She knows I mean it. Isabella looked at this man who had broken her heart and then saved her life. She saw the changes in him, the new strength, the determination, the love written plainly on his face. And she realized that holding on to her anger was only hurting herself and Thomas. I don't forgive you yet, she said carefully. That's going to take time. What you did or didn't do hurt me deeply. But I'm willing to try. For Thomas's sake, and maybe, eventually, for ours. Relief flooded James's face. That's all I'm asking for. A chance. Over the next 2 weeks, as Isabella recovered and Thomas grew stronger, James proved himself in small but meaningful ways. He stood up to a nurse who made a dismissive comment about single mothers. He had a firm conversation with his mother when she suggested Isabella should move to Chicago, making it clear that Isabella's choices would be respected. He spent hours learning how to change diapers, give bottles, and soothe a fussy baby. Ruby watched it all with cautious approval. He's trying, she admitted to Isabella one evening. I'm still mad at him on your behalf, but he's genuinely trying. The day Isabella was discharged, James helped carry her things to Ruby's car. Thomas was safely strapped into his car seat, sleeping peacefully. As they stood in the hospital parking lot, James pulled a small box from his pocket. I'm not proposing, he said quickly, seeing Isabella's alarm. I know we're not there yet, but I wanted you to have this. Inside the box was a delicate silver bracelet with 3 charms, a tiny heart, a baby booty, and a lighthouse. The heart is for love, James explained. The baby is for Thomas. And the lighthouse is for Seabrook, the place where our family truly began, where I finally learned to be the man you deserved all along. Isabella fastened the bracelet around her wrist, feeling the weight of it, the meaning. Thank you. Can I visit? James asked. I want to be part of Thomas's life. Part of your life, if you'll let me? Yes, Isabella said. You can visit. 6 months later, Isabella stood in her backyard in Seabrook, watching James push Thomas in a baby swing, both of them laughing. The house she had rented had become a home, filled with baby toys, architectural drawings, and slowly, carefully, evidence of James's growing presence in their lives. He had transferred to a hospital an hour away, close enough to be present, but far enough to give Isabella space. He came over 3 or 4 times a week, always calling first, always respecting her boundaries. He took night feedings and changed diapers. He read parenting books and baby-proofed cabinets. He showed up, and gradually, over those months, Isabella's heart began to heal. She saw how Thomas lit up when James walked through the door. She saw how patient and gentle James was, how he had truly changed from the man who valued reputation over love. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Thomas napped inside, James took her hand. Love you, he said simply. I never stopped, and I never will. I'm not asking you to marry me or even to take me back yet. I just wanted you to know that you're it for me. You and Thomas. My whole world. Isabella squeezed his hand, feeling tears in her eyes. I love you too. I tried not to, but I do. I think I always will. So where does that leave us? James asked gently. It leaves us right here, Isabella said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Building something new. Building trust. Building a family, one day at a time. A year after the storm, James knelt in that same backyard where Thomas now toddled around chasing butterflies. This time he had a ring, and this time Isabella said yes. Not because he was perfect, but because he had proven that love was about showing up. About choosing each other every single day. About being brave enough to fight for what mattered. They were married on the beach in Seabrook, with Thomas as the ring bearer and Ruby as maid of honor. Even Victoria attended. And while her relationship with Isabella would never be warm, it was respectful. Built on their mutual love for James and Thomas, as Isabella stood beside James. The ocean breeze lifting her hair, their son giggling in the front row. She realized that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from broken places. Sometimes you have to weather the storm to find your way home. And sometimes, just sometimes, second chances lead to the happiest endings of all.